those gestures of humility and modeling imperfection is so critical if you want people to innovate and create together.
What would happen if we just told the truth?
Welcome to TruthWorks, where we dig into the nitty-gritty of leadership and work.
And what needs to change? I'm Jessica Neal.
And I'm Patty McCord.
Our journey together started in HR, but trust us, it's evolved into something wild, honest, and, well, a bit rebellious.
So throw out the handbook. We're here to redefine rules to work for us, not against us.
Let's dive into another episode. We are joined today by Anne Jacoby, who is the author of an amazing book called Born to Create. And Anne and I met through mutual friend, Aaron Mitchell. And Aaron worked with me at Netflix, and he's just exceptional. Oh. And so he said, you need to know this lady. And I said, of course. And then I looked you up and I was like, well, this is pretty cool. When we talked, I think, you're sort of a kindred spirit in the sense of, I wasn't supposed to be a business professional, right? I went to art school. I was going to be a painter, but I wanted to be an artist. And my dad told me I'd make no money, and he begged me to go to business school. After college, he was right. I wasn't making any money as an artist, and I fell into business. And what I loved about business was that I thought it was creative. I loved solving problems, and that fear of mine that I wouldn't, sort of appease this sort of creative side of myself, or I would just have to let it go, became not true. And in fact, I enjoyed it more than painting sometimes. So anyways, we start talking about that, and that is your story in a similar way. So tell us who you are, who you were, how this all came to be. We want to know.
Yes. Thank you, Jessica and Patty. Thanks for having me on your show. And gosh, similar to you, Jessica, I, from a very early age, thought I was going to be a performer, right? It was just in my bones. It was just part of my existence.
And you were.
And I was, I moved through the world that way. And I did shows when I was a kid, and I went to the LA County High School for the Arts, which was this mind-blowing experience to connect with other young creators and artists. And I just really thought I would be performing into my old years. That was my path. And went to Northwestern, dropped out of Northwestern to perform. I joined Equity and was doing the thing, right? I was really wanting to start doing the work. And that took me to New York. And then I realized, wow, it really means waitressing and babysitting and doing all these other things to hustle, to do your craft. And, I'm dating myself here, but I was there during 9/11. And I just had this moment of, there's got to be a different path. There's got to be something else that can fill my cup creatively that also allows me to eventually buy a house or eventually have more financial security. Not to say that performers can't make a living. They do. I know plenty of them, but it's really hard. And so I joined this startup because I thought, well, gosh, this is a paycheck. I thought startup world was stable. It shows how little I knew about business at the time. But I just found, probably similar to you, Jessica, that, wow, building a business requires creativity. You've got to think creatively about, how are we going to solve this problem? Oops, this doesn't work. Let's try something new. Oh, we got to collaborate with these people. There's just this constant kind of improv and jumping into things. And the fearlessness that you get by performing on the stage also exists in building a business. And wow, I fell in love with it in a different way, right? It was using a different part of my brain. It was connecting new dots and ended up going to business school and getting my MBA. But that really was a pivotal moment for me to redefine creativity for myself in the business world was a big aha. And so that's really why I wrote the book, is to inspire that in others.
Right.
I found that I was going to be a teacher, and then I have a lot of inner artists too. That's a lot of the work I've done since I've retired, is be on boards of artist in residence programs and stuff like that. But what for me was amazing was I found that the most successful people that I worked with in business were also artists. I mean, I remember realizing that when somebody was creating a user interface in software, they were painting with zeros and ones. Jessica and I talk about that, or we've talked about that a lot, where it's like, is writing code like composing music if you're creating a new song or something like that? But similar for me too. But for me, it was like all of a sudden, like scales came from my eyes. It's like everybody can be creative.
Yeah.
Right? There's no reason you can't look at payroll creatively.
Yeah.
Or anything, right? I mean, it's all there. And how many people have that inner artist in them and then get confined by the box they're put in at work.
Oh, absolutely. And the expectations that come with certain roles. It's like we assume a certain character, I'm a business leader, I have to act a certain way. And,
right. I'm in finance.
Right. Instead, just connecting on a human level. That's really what art is finding that connection. And gosh, we need that in our workplace. We need to find those connections, and we need to understand each other and listen to each other and speak our truth. And I think that's why this book, if you apply that lens of the arts, and I'm not saying everyone has to be an artist, and that's what a successful business leader is, but tapping into that inner sense of, I have the power to create a new environment or a new tone culturally, or I have the power to change the way that we do things for the better. I think that's the mindset that I'm trying to share and inspire in others.
Well, tell us a little bit, you get your MBA, you get into the business world, and you're just inherently a creative person. And so there had to be something, like a thing that happened or a pattern that you saw where you were like, aha, I got to write this. This is important.
Yeah, it's such a good question. I mean, I had the great privilege of launching different offices in different regions. I was building this business, helping scale it, working with a lot of different organizational cultures. And that's really where I recognized, well, gosh, creativity has such an influence over culture. And how do we equip people with the tools to be creative, to form the environment that allows people to express themselves, allows people to have the safety to try new things, right? It's not for the faint of heart, sticking your neck out there, trying things in a different way. If you have a fear-based environment, that's a no-go, right? You're not going to foster that kind of connection and innovation, which most companies want. And so I really wanted to use that lens of creativity as a conduit to better cultures and to organizational culture that really brings out the best in people so that they are pumped to come to work because they get to do really new, exciting things and their voices are heard. And that was really the energy behind it.
Well, tell us a story about a company that did this and like what was happening before and then what happened after.
Yeah. I mean, one of the companies that I reference in the book, Activision Blizzard, going through a lot of culture change and wanting people to feel empowered to speak up and speak their truth. And I think that's so needed in our cultures. And in a lot of environments, people don't feel safe to speak up. They don't feel like their voice is going to be heard or taken seriously. And so we really tried to foster this culture of, my voice matters. I'm going to speak up. And I'm going to lean on certain colleagues. There's an amazing program called the Way to Play Heroes program, where ethical ambassadors are really helping others to get their voices heard and to speak their truth through different reporting channels. And so that's an example of a company that really thought about culture from the grassroots movement up. Yes, you want leaders to exemplify great culture, but you also need it to come from the roots of the organization. And working through that program and developing that program was an amazing experience. Obviously, it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, but that's really where culture transformation, I think, is possible.
And so Activision Blizzard, they're a gaming company and they, creativity and innovation is sort of the core of what they have to be if they want to make the best games.
Right.
And so when I think about cultural transformation, it's great if employees want that and have a voice. However, it's impossible to do if the leaders aren't going to do it.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? And so in this example of Activision Blizzard, how hard was it to, I'm sure it wasn't that hard to convince employees that, you have a voice that matters, they want it to be heard. How hard was it to convince the leadership or not only convince them, but get them to change their behaviors and their ways of operating to make this a reality?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's culture change, and I'm stealing this from Jen Brewer, who's the head of ethics and compliance there. It's one conversation at a time. And so it really does require that level of intimacy and that level of discovery of, oh, I did this and I had no idea that it had that kind of effect on someone. And so I'm going to try this next time. It's kind of that self-awareness, that individual journey that leaders kind of have to go through to affect the kind of change, right?
Yeah, it's doing the work. Like when you said, it's easy to say, I want a culture that's inclusive, that everybody feels strong. I mean, that's the easy part of leadership, and everybody says it. And what I love about your work is that it is the hard work of actually doing it. Jessica and I talk about this all the time. It's like, how do you get better at something? You practice.
Yeah.
Right? And human interaction is the same thing. To play on what you just said, it's not just those intimate conversations. It's sharing those intimate conversations with other people. Right? I tried this and it kind of worked because that's what creativity is. Like nobody knows the answer.
That's right. Oh, totally. And being okay saying, I tried this and it didn't work.
Yeah, right. Or even saying that to the person you're talking to, like, this isn't working, right?
Yes. Talk about truth telling.
Yeah.
Yes.
I had a conversation today. So I was talking to this CHRO at a company, and we were talking, and she is getting feedback that, she needs to be more creative, right? And more strategic. And we started talking about like what creativity could look like. And it was so funny, her response, because we started talking about being creative around compensation. We started talking about being creative around how we think about how we're effective and how we're working and how we're solving problems. And she was like, but I am very practical and frugal, and, I'm the CFO's best friend and we don't spend a lot of money. I was like, creativity, it doesn't equate to dollars, right? Like,
I'm sorry, but we can't afford to be creative here.
It's not a line item in our budget.
It's going to be too expensive. Going to have people thinking. It's just like.
Yeah, but I mean, she was sort of nervous. She was excited about the things that we were talking about. And I realized there were things that she hadn't quite considered, which all fine. But then my thing to her too is that also creativity might save money, right? It doesn't mean spending money. It may solve a problem better because now you're retaining more people. It's expensive to rehire people. Like, I don't know, whatever you want to say. You have a creativity because now the team's going to do X instead of Y, and X is better than Y.
What if you didn't have 11 sign-offs? What if it was 2? I mean, that saves 9 hours of work.
She got to that, and there was like some process that they were doing at one of the companies she worked for, and it was like, I don't know, got up to like 12 approvals, and she's like, and that was just silly. I was like, right, but that was creative. Like you pushing that and saying we're not doing that, that's creative. So the point of me jabbering on about this is that here I am, this person in my work, whether I'm the head of HR or I'm an engineer or whatever, and I don't feel I can be creative, right?
Whether or not somebody explicitly tells you, right? The vibe is, don't step outside.
Exactly. So what do you do if you're that person?
Yeah. I mean, I think people, first of all, some people really resist the word creativity. I'll just say it. They do not want to be associated with that. They think it's fluffy. They think it's chaotic. They really fear it. And I get that. I get it.
And yet innovative works fine.
Totally. Right, Patty?
Yeah,
exactly. Oh, but I want to innovate. Okay, without creativity.
Yeah,
All right.
okay.
But creating is
Right,
innovating.
right. The lens that you used earlier, Jessica, around problem solving, right? You're there to solve problems. You're there to think differently. And I think the other sort of myth about creativity is that it's got to be huge step change, right? It's got to be transformational,
All right.
right? We're inventing the new iPhone. But, in reality, it's these small incremental changes that lead to eventually really big savings or really big value creation or a new way of thinking about a client problem that you're solving. And so if you can just get people to move the notch a little bit and experiment, I'm really big into planned experiments, gather the data, especially for analytical thinkers, the engineers among us who, gosh, show me the data. Okay, you're going to experiment and run this experiment for a while. You're going to create, maybe we use those words, maybe we don't, but we're going to get creative around solving this problem in a new way. And then we're going to look at the data and see how it turned out and start small.
It gives people such permission when you say, let's give it a try. And if it doesn't work, I remember standing on a chair and saying to all the Netflix employees, or 100 of them or something, we're going to stop tracking vacation. And you know what? Everyone says everybody's going to sue us. Nobody's going to take vacation. Everybody's going to, it's going to be terrible. So let's try it for 6 months. And if the world as we know it comes to an end, like everyone says it is, then we'll go back and do what everybody else does and call it best practices.
Yeah.
Right, which is the other
And it
anti-creative
didn't.
phrase that we hate. It's like, oh, yeah, but that's best practices based on.
I'm so glad you said that because I've been thinking about my work and how I go in, I build workshops, I coach, I do culture assessment work. It is not one size fits all.
Ever.
And I think people think that it's going to be, oh, well, what's your standard process? I said, my standard process is figure it out, right? My standard process is to listen and to meet them where they are. And I think everyone wants this, silver bullet. I'm going to fix this by using this methodology. It just does not work that way. And so I'm just so delighted to hear that it is about no one knows what they're doing, really. But you got to be truthful and you got to just be open and honest.
Can we all just admit that?
Please.
Like, nobody knows what the fuck they're doing. Everybody's making it up.
They don't know. And the other thing is, like, if you screw it up, at least you know not that. Right? It's like, I always tell people that when I go into startups, the whiteboards aren't full of like fabulous ideas that are all going to be successful and make everybody a millionaire. The whiteboards are full of things crossed out like, not that, not that, not that.
Yeah.
Because it's the whole point, right? If somebody else figured it out, they'd already figured it out. It would be a problem to solve.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And I think sometimes on this more cultural behavior work, like people, they don't want to do that work.
Yeah.
Like it's hard, it's uncomfortable, it's not normal. It's fluffy. I don't know if I'm creative, like I'm not an artist, right? And they just want it to be great. And they just want it to be so. But it is a journey and it is hard work and it is trying and failing. And everybody just wants the fast ticket to greatness.
Yeah. But it's about like trying on the clothes, right?
Yeah.
You try on the leadership style, you try it on, you try on the language. It might work for you, it might not. You don't have to own it in your wardrobe forever, right? You can give it to Goodwill, but just try it on and see if it fits and see what you like about it. And I think that comes a lot from my theater background. It's just that ability to just jump in. We're going to try it. It's going to feel uncomfortable because it's new, but let's just try it on together, see what clicks, and then discard the rest,
Yeah, which I think is great. So if I'm a leader and I want to create a creative culture in my team, company, whatever.
Innovate.
I want to innovate. I don't want to create because that's, who creates those fluffy artists.
Right.
But if I want to innovate, what do I do? How do I start?
What's the answer?
Yeah.
What's the answer? What's the answer?
Here's the recipe. You ready for the recipe?
Yeah. Don't skimp on the sugar.
That's right. Look, it's got to feel safe. People have got to trust each other. They've got to feel comfortable saying something that might be unpopular. They got to feel comfortable sometimes criticizing the boss's ideas, right? It sounds so fundamental in a way and pedestrian, but gosh, if you really want to innovate, that's kind of table stakes. You have to have that kind of environment. Otherwise, why would anybody risk bringing a new idea into that environment? They're just not going to do it. So I think that's got to be first.
And so then would your advice be to that leader to say, hey, I want us to have this type of culture.
Yeah.
Right? And like maybe declare it and say, I want creativity, innovation, whatever you want to call it. And I want you to feel safe about saying the wrong thing. I want you to feel safe about bringing ideas. I want you to feel safe about, giving me critiques and telling me, where I could be better or if my idea isn't that great.
Oh,
right?
yeah. I like that word declare. Declaring it, but then also listening to the others around what does safety mean to you?
Right.
I want to hear it in your voice. What would that mean? Does it mean we save 15 minutes at the end of our meeting to kind of hear dissenting opinions? Now, I will caution that a lot of leaders who shall remain nameless say that they are open to criticism, but the minute they get it, wow, are they defensive or they shoot people down anyway. So you got to do the follow through. You got to be okay taking it in, listening to it, accepting it, doing something about it. I think that's an important part of closing that loop.
And model it, right? I mean, that's the other part I think is, basic listening skills, by repeating back what you just said that tells you that I heard it, right? I mean, it seems such a simple, pedantic thing to do, but other people can watch you and go, wow, Jessica told the truth and no one killed her. She didn't die. She didn't, it wasn't a career limiting move. And I think you heard her.
Yeah, I think storytelling too is such an important leadership skill to be able to tell the stories of, I tried this and it didn't work, or I totally bid it on this, experiment and this is what I'm going to do differently. I think that those gestures of humility and modeling imperfection is so critical if you want people to innovate and create together.
I find, in some ways, it's the big companies where most of middle upper management came from within. And you're just so trained to do it the way you've always done it.
Yeah.
And then people wonder, well, why can't we innovate? And the other thing I think that's really important to factor in, and Jessica, you mentioned it when you talked about being creative with this person around compensation, it's all the systems around it.
Oh,
right?
yes.
If your reward systems reward following the rules, then you can talk about breaking them.
Yes. I'm so glad that you mentioned that because rewards is such an important part of this, and celebrating the creative process and not just the creative output is really paramount. We're also results driven. And, I got to meet this goal and that's when I'm going to get my big bonus. How about, wow, you tried these things and they did not work, but yay you for trying. And that's a muscle to be developed.
Yeah.
That's a leadership muscle.
And hard. I mean, for all of us, right? I mean, I think the other part is that when you talked about being straightforward with people, one of the things I wish I hadn't ever said that I stole from another author was radical honesty. I wish I had never said that. Yeah, because it's not radical to be honest. It's just being honest. Yeah. That's why we called our podcast Truth Works, which is like, we're not talking about doing something fucking crazy. We're just talking about telling that didn't work.
True.
Yeah.
The other thing I think that it's really helpful is when they try something that doesn't work, to be able to say, here's what the circumstances were then, and here's what they are now. Right. So I'm not sure that it didn't work because it was a bad idea. It might have been the right idea at the wrong time, which you learn in performing all the time, right? Which is like, wow, that bombed, but now,
Yeah, it's so funny that you mentioned that because with creativity, like there were a bunch of us at Netflix that had been there a really long time. But all the time we were bringing in new people to the company, and we wanted to bring in new people for their perspective and their experience. Then they would come and they would be like, okay, why don't we try this? And we're like, yeah, we did that. It didn't work. Why don't you try this? Yeah, we did that. It didn't work.
Jessica, Jessica.
Because there was these folks that had been here for a long time. But it's like, we had tried it 7 years ago.
Right. I remember, hiring a data scientist, and we were at a meeting. Everybody's like, "Yeah, we tested that. And he's like, he was this total dweeby guy. He's like, "Yes, I looked at all the tests. I'm a data scientist. You tested that 7 years ago, and here were the demographics of our customer base then." Right.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's not just other geeks anymore. It's your mom. And, so that's the other beautiful thing about creativity is reaching back. I mean, back far to that time that you took a risk or you did something scary, or it's scary in that good adrenaline producing way, right? Like
it is, but I think organizations get, into a mode of that where it's like, and then that culture of creativity, innovation, whatever we're calling it, it gets stifled because people say, we don't want to hear it. And so then the people aren't going to do it again, right? Because they come forward, they take the risk of saying, hey, why don't we try this? And they're like, no, didn't work. And so then the next time those people aren't going to take that risk.
My question was like, what do you say to those guys?
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting. I think you're right. When people fall into that pattern of, well, we're going to choose what we've done before because it's perceived as lower risk because we kind of know what the outcome is.
Right.
And I would argue that it's not necessarily lower risk because you've got to keep changing. You've got to keep evolving and innovating if you want to stay alive in today's business world. It's just the name of the game. And there is a cost and a real risk of doing nothing, of not trying. And so I think it kind of starts with the mindset of the leaders and the culture of, no, we believe that we're going to place some bets and we're going to try some things. And it's going to be foreign and new and different and scary at times. But if we don't do it, there's a real cost and a risk to not doing those new creative, innovative ideas.
As you were talking, I was thinking about sometimes my advice is, those folks that are just dug in, they just can't play anymore. They need to go somewhere else where it's okay to do that. But then there's part of me that says, can we go back and teach an old dog new tricks, right? Sometimes, like when I was at Netflix and we moved into hardware, we didn't know anybody who knew anything about that shit. I mean, we were all software engineers. So we started recruiting from like Sony and the big hardware companies. And what we found was that in all those companies was a rebel, right? In all those companies was somebody who could have, they just couldn't. Right. And so,
because they weren't in the right infrastructure.
They knew that if they kept acting like they were acting, they were going to get fired. So they had to conform. But do you got a secret sauce for releasing that in people where it's stifled?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like any kind of behavior change. There's got to be enough motivation to want to change. Otherwise, okay, moving on. You kind of have to pick your battles, see where the impact is going to be, see what leaders are ready for that kind of change. And the change has got to start from within. It's got to be, wow, I recognize that my behavior, my leadership practices have real influence over the dynamic of the team, the generative ideas that are flowing through it. And so unless people can recognize that, step back and recognize that, it is very hard to kind of spark that kind of change that I think we're talking about here.
So I think there's always a fear as businesses scale and get successful in sort of, becoming a dinosaur, dying out, making that second S curve, right? And you hear these things of like, Microsoft's really trying to bring in more innovation, or it's usually with like the bigger Coca-Cola, But there's really good businesses that can sustain, but I don't know how innovative or creative they are. But there's also businesses who do die out because they don't have that creative, innovative muscle. I mean, you think about like Apple, like they're sort of constantly have like a flow of innovation, right? And no one's really seemed to have caught them. But then there's other companies where maybe they have really creative people, but they still don't quite make it.
And there's companies where we talked about it at the beginning of the podcast, where certain employees are allowed to be creative.
Yes. You're
Yes.
anointed.
Right.
We're in the R&D team.
Yeah, right. We're in the innovation department, right? So God forbid that you would be innovative in finance or
Right.
customer service.
I think that's the ticket. I think the perception that only certain anointed few are deemed creative
Right.
and have the power to come up with a new idea. It's really about how do we infuse that across all departments so that everyone's looking for the next thing that could lead to continuous improvement. And it can be small, but it could be just a micro change that's going to really impact and influence how things get done in a more creative or innovative way. So I do think it's that zooming out and seeing, okay, we all have the power to influence. We all have the capability to be creative. And that kind of starts with a mindset.
Are you hopeful?
I'm very hopeful. I was thinking of I think PwC ran a survey and said 40% of the CEOs they surveyed said the business that they run today will not be in existence 10 years from now.
Wow.
40%. It's pretty staggering. And I think that reinvention, whether you're within a company or whether you're an individual, just reinventing your career and doing that career pivot, we can change more than we think we can. And it's kind of that belief that, no, I could reinvent. I can change the trajectory of either the company, my team, myself, that I hope people find within themselves.
Patty and I were just talking to this gentleman the other day, Matt Bean, right? And he's this AI researcher.
Yeah.
Fabulous. But it just got me thinking, like, do you think that there's some element of AI that can help amplify some of the creativity and innovation in these organizations?
The metric that most people use with something like AI is it makes it faster. And so faster equals better equals, all the things that we care about measuring. So done and done. It's funny, Jessica, after that podcast, I listened to somebody who is a music professor, and he was just like, create a song in the voice of Billy Joel that's an NPR broadcaster about blah, blah, blah. And AI created this thing. It's like, wow, it's kind of like early Bob Dylan. It was like, okay, that works, right? And so the person was saying, well, why do you use this technology in your class of students who are writing songs? And he's like, to show them what mediocre is. Right? That is the ultimate, lowest common denominator with all the data in the world. This is what a machine can do. And all of you can do better.
Yeah.
Right. I thought, wow, that was so interesting. So, I mean, where is it for you? Are machines going to think for us? I mean,
what I was thinking about for like AI is like, can it change the behavior? Can it nudge you? If you get a little thing as a leader that says, don't forget to ask for feedback, or talk about a failure.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Oh, I think it can be tremendously helpful. I think all of that, the automation, the nudging in L&D spaces, all of that can be really useful. But I think nothing really replaces the generative process, call it learning, call it mastering a craft, around modeling a specific practice. You got to develop the grooves in your muscle memory. And that's what the arts brings, is that ability to break down a process. I just took my dance class this morning. I'm really religious about getting into the studio. I'm not very good. It's been many, many years since I danced, but just that muscle memory and that learning the new choreography every week. There's something within it.
It's called joy, right?
Yes.
It's not called efficiency for a reason.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, to me, what you're talking about is bringing back that feeling that you get from inventing something, innovating something, doing something different, having it work. I always say, you never go home from work and tell your pet or your partner, oh my God, it was a great day at work today. We had cookies with macadamia nuts. right? You go home and tell your pet or your partner, we had a great day today. We did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it could be the tiniest little, I did it. We did it.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, I mean, maybe some people get it from efficiency. I shouldn't. Like,
Some people really like efficient things.
yeah, but
That's
I'm
true.
saying that that's what you were talking about, right? That's the intrinsic reward as humans we get that we really don't get anywhere else.
Yeah. And it's a social experience. Creativity is not in a vacuum. We're not creating for creativity's sake. We're creating in the context of a business and solving a problem and connecting with other humans, whether that's our colleagues or our customers or whomever. We're trying to make this a little bit of a better place to be. And I think that's why we're here. Let's do it in a joyful way.
That's why we're here.
That's
Yes.
why we're
Okay.
here.
Yay. Well, Anne, this has been amazing. And you've inspired me. I'm going to push more creativity into the world through my coaching and advising. And I might even do some painting this weekend, I think. I don't know.
It's time for career confessions.
Time for career confessions. Here we go. Unmotivated manager.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm a manager of quite a large team and I'm feeling stuck in a rut at work. The daily grind has me feeling uninspired and I'm struggling to motivate both myself and my team. And I think my team is suffering because of it. Recently, 2 long-term members of staff have left for roles elsewhere that aren't any higher up than what they already did here. Any tips of breaking out of this cycle and finding a renewed passion so I can be the motivated leader I was when I first started? That's a great question. And good on this person for being self-reflective, right?
Yeah.
And what do you say?
What do I say? If I were in this situation, I think stay interviews can be really powerful, almost like a little mini listening tour and understanding what is keeping people here.
Stay interview.
And listening tour. I'm stealing both of those. Are we stealing those? We're totally stealing those. Yeah.
You can have them for free.
Listening tour is such a good phrase.
Listening tour, yeah.
You need to have more multiple one-on-ones with your staff to get feedback from them on how you might better improve your own performance and theirs. Listening tour is like, just shut up and fucking listen.
Yeah.
So what's a stay interview?
So a stay interview, people always talk about exit interviews, right? Oh, why did you leave the company? You didn't advance in your career to go to this other company. By that, they're gone, whatever.
Bye-bye.
Not that that's not important, but let's be real. The people who are still there, you still have the opportunity to do something to make this a better experience for them. So gosh, understand why they're still here. Listen to them. What lights them up at work? What dims their light? Let's hear it. Let's hear all the things. Let's get it all out there. And, we know it's not just perks, and we know that it's about meaningful work and meaningful experiences together. So gosh, let's start there. That's what I'd say. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah.
I love it too. And as leaders and when you're running organizations, you think a lot about who's really happy and why are they happy? And can I do more of that? Right. And you only kind of talk to the people that are leaving.
Yeah. You take them for granted, right?
Yeah. And there's like, oh, they're happy. They're fine. Right. They're not a worry, but they may become a worry. And, I think the other thing to this leader, the only thing that I would say is that I'm happy that they're self-reflective and admitting this because their behavior likely is impacting the team. And people stay in jobs, to your point, Anne, not because of the benefits or the compensation. That stuff matters some. They stay because they love the people that they're working with. They love their boss. They love their team. And they love the problems they're solving. Everybody's like, oh, we got to solve retention. People stay because they love who they work for, right? And they leave because they don't like their bosses, right? So, and I'm not saying to this person that they don't like you. However, maybe your behavior is impacting the team and it's something to look at.
The other thing that comes to mind just as you're talking is kind of reassessing the priorities. I think when I read The Daily Grind, right, that is often code for I've got 20 things on my list that are all deemed priorities. And so how can you as a leader of this group kind of reassess and really pick what are the top 3 things that we need to be focused on?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that will lighten this leader's load to really focus in on this is what matters, but it'll probably have a ripple effect to the team as well so that they're not chasing and caught in that daily grind.
Absolutely.
Good point. Well, thank you, Anne. It was so fun.
Thank you, Anne.
Yes, thanks for having me. What a blast.
Thanks for listening to TruthWorks. This episode was produced and edited by Megan Hayward and Mick Finnegan. Thank you, Kathleen Speckert and the whole Edit Audio team.